Another Sunday Superversive live stream. I am your host, Benjamin Wheeler, and I am here today to read Pilgrim's Progress. My usual co-host, Anthony Marquetta, is not here today. This is, of course, Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan, Oxford edition. This one is a beautiful 1904 leather bound with gold embossing of flowers. It is absolutely one of the most beautiful books I've ever seen. I'll put up some pictures on my Twitter later on. It's got 25 illustrations by George Cruikshank and published by London, Edinburgh, Glasgow, New York, and Toronto, Henry Frau. One of the most beautiful books I've ever seen. I'll put up some pictures on my Twitter later on. It's got 25 illustrations. My goodness. My apologies, ladies and gentlemen. Lovely gold edging. This is a beautiful book. I am almost afraid to read from it. John Bunyan wrote this this famous book, mostly in prison. Because he was a preacher and he was persecuted for his preaching. Quite frankly, it's one of those sort of pressure creates diamond stories in Christendom. Absolutely beautiful, wonderful book. Let's see here. Amazing. You have to understand the pleasure of, he was a Baptist, as you might imagine, in England back in the day. Do I want to read that? No, I'll just start with the story. And so he even has an apology for the book, which ends with, "Wouldst thou be in a dream and yet not sleep? Or wouldst thou in a moment laugh and weep? Wouldst thou lose thyself and catch no harm, and find thyself again without a charm? Wouldst thou read thyself and read thou knowest not what, and yet know whether thou art blessed or not, by reading the same lines? O then come hither, and lay my book, thy head and heart together." John Bunyan. In case you're wondering, why is Pilgrim's Progress important? Besides the sales figures, it is the inspiration for fantasy in general, especially in the English tradition. Men like George MacDonald certainly knew and read this book often. It is a foundation of English Christendom fiction and should be respected as such. Let's begin. The Pilgrim's Progress, in the similitude of a dream. As I walked through the wilderness of this world, I lighted on a certain place where was a den, and I laid me down in that place to sleep. And as I slept, I dreamed a dream. I dreamed, and behold, I saw a man clothed in rags, standing in a certain place, with his face from his own house, a book in his hand, and a great burden upon his back. I looked and saw him open the book and read therein. And as he read, he wept and trembled. And not being able longer to contain, he brake out with a lamentable cry, saying, "What shall I do?" In this plight, therefore, he went home, and refrained himself as long as he could, that his wife and children should not perceive his distress. But he could not be silent long, because that his trouble increased. Wherefore at length he brake his mind to his wife and children, and thus he began to talk to them. "O my dear wife," said he, "and you the children of my bowels, I, your dear friend, am in myself undone, by reason of a burden that lieth hard upon me. Moreover, I am for certain informed that this our city will be burned with fire from heaven, in which fearful overthrow, both myself with thee, my wife, and you, my sweet babes, shall miserably come to ruin, except, the which yet I see not, some way of escape be found, whereby we may be delivered. At that his relations were sore amazed, not for that they believed that what he had said to them was true, but because they thought that some frenzied distemper had gotten into his head. Therefore, it drawing towards night, and they, hoping that sleep might settle his brains, with all haste they got him to bed. But the night was as troublesome to him as the day. Wherefore, instead of sleeping, he spent it in sighs and tears. So when the morning was come, they would know how he did. He told them worse and worse. He also set to talking to them again, but they began to be hardened. They also thought to drive away his distemper by harsh and surly carriages to him. Sometimes they would deride, sometimes they would chide, and sometimes they would quite neglect him. Wherefore he began to retire himself to his chamber to pray for, and pity them, and also to condole his own misery. He would also walk solitarily in the fields, sometimes reading and sometimes praying, and thus for some days he spent his time. Now I saw upon a time, when he was walking in the fields, that he was, as was his wont, reading in his book, and greatly distressed in his mind, and as he read he burst out, as he had done before, crying, "What shall I do to be saved?" I saw also that he looked this way and that way, as if he would run, yet he stood still, because as I perceived he could not tell which way to go. I looked then and saw a man named Evangelist coming to him, and asked, "Wherefore dost thou cry?" He answered, "Sir, I perceive by the book in my hand that I am condemned to die, and after that to come to judgment. And I find that I am not willing to do the first, nor able to do the second." Then said Evangelist, "Why not willing to die, since this life is attended with so many evils?" The man answered, "Because I fear that this burden that is upon my back will sink me lower than the grave, and I shall fall into Tophet. And, sir, if I be not fit to go to prison, I am not fit, I am sure, to go to judgment, and from thence to execution, and the thoughts of these things make me cry." Then said Evangelist, "If this be thy condition, why standest thou still?" He answered, "Because I know not whither to go." Then he gave him a parchment roll, and there was written within, "Fly from the wrath to come." The man therefore read it, and looking upon Evangelist very carefully, said, "Whither must I fly?" Then said Evangelist, pointing with his finger over a very wide field, "Do you see yonder wicket gate?" The man said, "No." Then said the other, "Do you see yonder shining light?" He said, "I think I do." Then said Evangelist, "Keep that light in your eye, and go directly thereto. So shalt thou see the gate, at which when thou knockest, it shall be told thee what thou shalt do." So I saw in my dream that the man began to run. Now he had not run far from his own door, but his wife and children, perceiving it, began to cry after him to return. But the man put his fingers in his ears and ran on crying, "Life! Life! Eternal life!" So he looked not behind him, but fled towards the middle of the plain. The neighbors also came out to see him run, and as he ran, some mocked, others threatened, and some cried after him to return. And among those that did so, there were 2 that were resolved to fetch him back by force. The name of the one was Obstinate, and the other Pliable. Now by this time the man had gotten a good distance from them, but, however, they were resolved to pursue him, which they did, and in a little time they overtook him. Then said the man, "Neighbors, wherefore are you come?" They said, "To persuade you to go back with us." But he said, "That can by no means be. You dwell, said he, in the city of destruction, the place where I was born. I see it to be so, and dying there, sooner or later you will sink lower than the grave, into a place that burns with fire and brimstone. Be content, good neighbors, and go along with me. What? Said Obstinate, and leave our friends and our comforts behind us? Yes, said Christian, for that was his name, because that all is not worthy to be compared with a little of that which I am seeking to enjoy. And if you will go along with me and hold it, you shall fare as I myself. For there where I go is enough, and to spare, come away and prove my words. Obstinate. What are these things you seek, since you leave all the world to find them? Christian. I seek an inheritance, incorruptible, undefiled, and that fadeth not away, and it is laid up in heaven, and safe there to be bestowed at that time appointed on them, that diligently seek it. Read it so, if you will, in my book. Obstinate. Tush, said Obstinate. Away with your book. Will you go back with us or no? No, not I, said the other, because I have laid my hand to the plough. Obstinate. Come then, neighbor Pliable, let us turn again and go home without him. There is a company of these crazed head coxcombs that when they take a fancy by the end are wiser in their own eyes than 7 men that can render a reason. Then said Pliable, Don't revile. What if what the good Christian says is true, the things he looks after are better than ours? My heart inclines to go with my neighbor. Obstinate. What? More fools still? Be ruled by me and go back. Who knows whither such a brain-sick fellow will lead you? Go back and be wise. Nay, says Christian, but do thou come with me, neighbor Pliable. There are such things to be had which I spoke of, and many more glories besides. If you believe not me, read here in this book, and for the truth of what is expectest therein, behold, all is confirmed by the blood of him that made it. Pliable. Well, neighbor Obstinate, I begin to come to a point. I intend to go along with this good man and to cast in my lot with him. But my good companion, do you know the way to this desired place? Christian. I am directed by a man whose name is Evangelist, to speed me to a little gate that is before us, where we shall receive instruction about the way. Pliable. Come then, good neighbor, let us be going. Then they went both together. Obstinate. And I will go back to my place. I will be no companion of such misled, fantastical fellows. Now, I saw in my dream that when Obstinate was gone back, Christian and Pliable went talking over the plain, and thus they began their discourse. Come, neighbor Pliable, how do you do? I am glad you are persuaded to go along with me, and had even Obstinate himself but felt that what I have felt of the powers and the terrors of what is yet unseen, he would not thus lightly have given us the back. Pliable. Come, neighbor Christian, since there is none but us two here, tell me now further of what things are, and how to be enjoyed, whither we are going. Christian. I can better conceive of them with my mind than speak of them with my tongue, but yet since you are desirous to know, I will read of them in my book. And do you think the words of your book are certainly true? Yes, verily, for it was made by him that cannot lie. Well said. What things are they? There is an endless kingdom to be inhabited, an everlasting life to be given to us, that we may inhabit the kingdom forever. Well said, and what else? There are crowns of glory to be given us, and garments that will make us shine like the sun in the firmament of the heaven. This is excellent. What else? There shall be no more crying or sorrow, for he that is the owner of the palace will wipe away all our tears from our eyes. And what company shall we have there? There shall be with seraphims and cherubims, creatures that will dazzle your eyes to look on them. There also you shall meet with thousands and 10,000s that have gone before us to that place. None of them are hurtful, but loving and holy, everyone walking in the sight of God and standing in his presence with acceptance forever. In a word, we shall see elders with their golden crowns. There we shall see the holy virgins with their golden harps. There we shall see men that by the world were cut to pieces, burned in flames, eaten of beasts, drowned in the seas, for the love that they bear to the Lord of the place, all well and clothed with immortality as with a garment. The hearing of this is enough to ravish one's heart. But are these things to be enjoyed? How shall we get to be sharers thereof? The Lord, the governor of that country, hath recorded that in this book, the substance of which is, if we be truly willing to have it, he will bestow it upon us freely. Well, my good companion, glad am I to hear of these things. Come, let us mend our pace. I cannot go as fast as I would, by reason of this burden that is on my back. Now I saw in my dream that just as they had ended this talk, they drew near to a very miry slough that was in the midst of the plain, and they, being heedless, did both fall suddenly into the bog. The name of the slough was Despond. Therefore they wallowed for a time, being grievously bedaubed with the dirt, and Christian, because of his burden that was on his back, began to sink in the mire. Then said Pliable, Ah, neighbor Christian, where are you now? Truly, said Christian, I do not know. At that Pliable began to be offended, and angrily said to his fellow, Is this the happiness you have told me this while of? If we have such an ill speed at our first setting out, what may we expect twixt this and our journey's end? May I get out again with my life, you shall possess the brave country alone for me. And with that he gave a desperate struggle or two, and got out of the mire, on that side of the slough which was next to his own house. So away he went, and Christian saw him no more. Wherefore Christian was left to tumble in the slough of despond alone. But still he endeavored to struggle to that side of the slough that was still further from his own house, and next to the wicket gate, the which he did, but could not get out, because of the burden that was on his back. But I beheld in my dream that a man came to him whose name was Help, and asked him what he did there. Sir, said Christian, I was directed this way by a man called Evangelist, who directed me also to yonder gate, that I might escape the wrath to come. And as I was going hither, I fell in here. Help. But why did you not look for the steps? Fear followed me so hard that I fled the next way and fell in. Then said Help, Give me thy hand. So he gave him his hand, and he drew him out, and set him upon sound ground, and bid him go on his way. Then I stepped to him that plucked him out, and said, Sir, wherefore, since over this place is the way from the city of destruction to yonder gate, is it that this plat is not mended, that poor travelers might go thither with more security? And Help said to me, This miry slough is such a place as cannot be mended. It is the descent whither the scum and filth that attends conviction for sin doth continually run, and therefore it is called the slough of despond. For still as a sinner is awakened about his lost condition, there ariseth in his soul many fears and doubts, and discouraging apprehensions, which all of them get together and settle in this place. This is the reason of the badness of this ground. It is not the pleasure of the king that this place should remain so bad. His laborers also have, by distinction of his majesty's surveyors, been above this 1600 years employed about this patch of ground. If perhaps it might have been mended, yea, and to my knowledge, said Help, here hath been swallowed up at least 20,000,000 cartloads, yea, millions of wholesome instructions, that have at all seasons been brought from all places of the king's dominions. And they that can tell say that they are the best materials to make good ground of this place. If so be it might have been mended, but it is the slow of despond, still, and so will be when they have done what they can. True, there are, by direction of the lawgiver, certain good and substantial steps placed even throughout the very midst of the slough, but at such time as this place doth much spew out its filth as it doth against change of weather, these steps are hardly seen, or if they be, men through the dizziness of their heads step beside, and then they are bemired to purpose. Notwithstanding the steps be there, but the ground is good when they are once got in at the gate. Now I saw in my dream that by this time Pliable was got to his house again. So his neighbors came to visit him, and some of them called him a wise man for coming back, and some called him a fool for hazarding himself with Christian. Others again did mock at his cowardliness, saying, Surely, since you began to venture, I would not have been so base to have given out for a few difficulties. So Pliable sat sneaking around them, among them, but at last he got more confidence, and then they all turned their tails and began to deride poor Christian behind his back. And thus much concerning Pliable. Now as Christian was walking solitarily by himself, he espied one afar off come crossing over the field to meet him, and their hap was to meet just as they were crossing the way of each other. The gentleman's name was Mr. Worldly Wiseman. He dwelt in the town of Carnal Policy, a very great town, and also hard by from whence Christian came. This man, then meeting with Christian, and having some inkling of him, for Christian setting forth from the city of destruction, was much noised abroad, not only in the town where he dwelt, but also it began to be the town's talk in some other places. Master Worldly Wiseman, therefore, having some guess of him, by beholding his laborious going, and by observing his sighs and groans and the like, began thus to enter into some talk with Christian. How now, good fellow, whither away after this burdened manner? Christian. A burdened manner indeed, as ever I think a poor creature had. And whereas you ask me, whither away, I tell you, sir, I am going to yonder wicket gate before me, for there, as I am informed, I shall be put into a way to be rid of my heavy burden. Worldly Wise. Hast thou a wife and children? Christian. Yes, but I am so laden with my burden that I cannot take pleasure in them as formerly. Methinks I am as if I had none. Worldly Wise. Wilt thou hearken to me if I give thee counsel? If it be good, I will, for I stand in need of good counsel. I would advise thee then that thou with all speed get thyself rid of thy burden, for thou wilt never be settled in mind till then, nor canst thou enjoy the benefits of the blessing which God hath bestowed upon thee till then. That is which I seek for, even to be rid of this heavy burden, but to get it off myself I cannot, nor is there a man in our country that can take it off my shoulders. Therefore I am going this way, as I told you, that I may be rid of my burden. Who bid thee to go this way to be rid of thy burden? A man appeared to me to be a very great and honorable person. His name, as I remember, is Evangelist. I beshrew him for his counsel. There is not a more dangerous and troublesome way in the world than is that unto which he hath directed thee. And thou shalt find, if thou wilt be ruled by his counsel. Thou hast met with something, as I perceive, already. For I see the dirt of the slough of despond is upon ye. But that slough is the beginning of the sorrows that do attend those that go on in that way. Hear me, I am older than thou. Thou art like to meet with in the way which thou goest wearisomeness, painfulness, hunger, perils, nakedness, sword, lions, dragon, darkness, and in a word, death, and what not. These things are certainly true, having been confirmed by many testimonies. And why should a man so carelessly cast away himself by giving heed to a stranger? Why, sir, this burden on my back is more terrible to me than all the things which you have mentioned. Nay, methinks I care not what I meet with in the way, so be I can also meet with deliverance from my burden. How comest thou by thy burden at first? By reading the book in my hand. I thought so. And it happened unto thee as to other weak men, who, meddling with things too high for them, do suddenly fall into thy distractions, which distractions do not only unman men, as thine, I perceive, has done thee. Excuse me. There we go. Sorry about that. The paper left my hands for some reason. But they run them upon desperate ventures to obtain they know not what. I know what I should attain. It is ease for my heavy burden. But why wilt thou seek for ease this way, seeing so many dangers attend it, especially since, hadst thou but patience to hear me, I could direct thee to the obtaining of what thou desirest, without the dangers that thou in this way wilt run thyself into. Yea, and the remedy is at hand. Besides, I will add that instead of those dangers thou shalt meet with much safety, friendship, and content. Pray, sir, open the secret to me. Why, in that yonder village, the village is named Morality, there dwells a gentleman whose name is Legality, a very judicious man, and a man of very good name, that has skill to help men off with such burdens as thine are from their shoulders. Yea, to my knowledge, he hath done a great deal of good this way. Aye, and besides, he hath skill to cure those that are somewhat crazed in their wits with their burdens. To him, as I said, thou mayest go, and be helped presently. His house is not quite a mile from this place, and if he should not be at home himself, he hath a pretty young man to his son, whose name is Civility, that can do it, to speak on, as well as the old gentleman himself. Therefore I say thou mayest be eased of thy burden, and if thou art not minded to go back to thy former habitation, as indeed I would not wish thee, thou mayest send for thy wife and children to thee to this village, where there are houses now standing empty, one of which thou mayest have at reasonable rates. Provision is there also cheap and good, and that which will make thy life more happy is, to be sure thou shalt live by honest neighbors in credit and good fashion. Now was Christian somewhat at a stand, but presently he concluded, if this be true what this gentleman hath said, my wisest course is to take his advice. And with that he thus further spoke. Sir, which way to this honest man's house? World, do you see yonder high hill? There's a image that's called Mount Sinai, of an immense mountain climbing up all the way to the sky. Yes, very well. By that hill you must go, and the first house you come to at is his. So Christian turned out of his way to go to Mr. Legality's house for help. But behold, when he had got now hard by the hill, it seemed so high, and also that side of it that was next the wayside, that was next the way to the wayside, did hang so much over that Christian was afraid to venture further, lest the hill should fall on his head. Wherefore there he stood still, and what not want to do. Also his burden now seemed heavier to him than while he was in the way. There came also flashes of fire out of the hill that made Christian afraid he should be burned. Here therefore he sweat, and did quake in fear. And now he began to be sorry that he had taken Mr. Worldly Wiseman's counsel. And with that he saw Evangelist coming to meet him, at the sight of also of whom he began to blush for shame. So Evangelist drew nearer and nearer, and coming up to him, he looked upon him with a severe and dreadful countenance, and thus began to reason with Christian. What dost thou here, Christian? Said he, at which word Christian knew not what to answer, wherefore at present he stood speechless before him. Then said Evangelist farther, Art not thou the man I found crying without the walls of the city of destruction? Yes, sir, I am the same. Did not I direct thee the way? I am the man. Yes, sir, I am the man. Did not I direct thee the way to the little wicket gate? Yes, sir, said Christian. Yes, dear sir, said Christian. Excuse me. How is it that thou art so quickly turned aside? For thou art now out of the way. I met a gentleman. So soon as I had got over the slough of despond, he persuaded me that I might in the village before me find a man that could take off my burden. What was he? He looked like a gentleman, and talked much to me, and got me at last to yield, so I came hither. But when I beheld this hill, and how it hangs over the way, I suddenly made a stand, lest it should fall on my head. What said that gentleman to you? Why, he asked me whither I was going, and I told him. And what said he then? He asked me if I had a family, and I told him. But, said I am so loaden with this burden that is on my back, that I cannot take pleasure in them as formerly. And what said he then? He bid me with speed to get rid of my burden, and I told him 'twas ease I sought. And said I am therefore going to yonder gate to receive further direction how I may get to the place of deliverance. So he said that he would show me a better way, in short, not so attended with difficulties as the way, sir, that you set me. Which way, said he, will direct you to a gentleman's house, and hath skill to take off these burdens. So I believed him, and turned out of that way into this, if haply I might be soon eased of my burden. But when I came to this place and beheld things as they are, I stopped for fear, as I said, of danger. But I know I now know not what to do. Then said Evangelist, stand still a little, that I may show thee the words of God. So he stood trembling. Then said Evangelist, see that ye refuse not him that speaketh. For if they escaped not who refused him that spake on earth, much more shall not we escape if we turn away from him that speaketh from heaven. Now the just shall live by faith, but if any man draws back, my soul shall have no pleasure in him. He also did thus apply them. Thou art the man that art running into this misery, that thou hast began to reject the counsel of the Most High, and to draw back thy foot from the way of peace, even almost to the hazarding of thy perdition. Then Christian fell down at his foot and as dead, crying, Woe is me, for I am undone. At the sight of which Evangelist caught him by the right hand, saying, All manner of sin and blasphemy shall be forgiven unto men. Be not faithless, but believing. Then did Christian again a little revive, and stood up trembling as at first, before Evangelist. Then Evangelist proceeded, saying, Give more earnest heed to the things that I shall tell thee of. I will now show thee who it was that deluded thee, and who 'twas also to whom he sent thee. The man that met thee is one worldly wiseman. There's a note. When Christians unto carnal men give ear, out of their way they go, and pay for it dear. For master worldly wiseman can but show a saint the way to bondage and to woe. And rightly is he so called, partly because he savoreth only of the doctrine of this world. Therefore he always goes to the town of morality, to church. And partly because he loveth that doctrine best, for it saveth him from the cross. And because he is of this carnal temper, therefore he seeketh to prevent thy ways, though right. Now there are 3 things in this man's counsel that thou must utterly abhor. 1. His turning thee out of the way. 2. His laboring to render the cross odious to thee. 3. And his setting thy feet in that way which leadeth unto the administration of death. First, thou must abhor his turning thee out of the way, yea, and thine own consenting thereto, because this is to reject the counsel of God for the sake of the counsel of the worldly wiseman. The Lord says, Strive to enter in at the gate, strait gate, the gate to which I sent thee. For strait is the gate that leadeth unto life, and few there be that find it. From this little wicket gate, and from the way thereto, hath this wicked man turned thee to the bringing of thee almost to destruction. Hate therefore his turning thee out of the way, and abhor thyself for hearkening to him. Secondly, thou must abhor his laboring to render the cross odious to thee, for thou art to prefer it before the treasures of Egypt. Besides, the King of glory hath told thee that he will save his life. He that will save his life shall lose it. And he that comes after him and hates not his father and mother and wife and children and brethren and sisters, yea, and his own life also, he cannot be my disciple. I say therefore, for a man to labor to persuade thee that shall be your death, without which the truth hath said, thou canst not have eternal life. This doctrine thou must abhor. Thirdly, thou must hate his setting of thy feet in the way that leadeth to the ministration of death, and for this thou must consider to whom he sent thee, and also how unable that person was to deliver me from thy burden. He to whom thou wast sent for ease, by being by name legality, is the son of the bondwoman which now is, and is in bondage with her children, and is in a mystery, this Mount Sinai, which thou hast feared will fall on thy head. Now if she with her children are in bondage, how canst thou expect by them to be made free? This legality, therefore, is not able to set thee free from thy burden. No man was as yet ever rid of his burden by him, no, nor ever is like to be. Ye cannot be justified by the works of the law, for by the deeds of the law no man living can be rid of his burden. Therefore Mr. Worldly Wiseman is an alien, and Mr. Legality is a cheat. And for his son's civility, notwithstanding his simpering looks, he is but a hypocrite, and cannot help thee. Believe me, there is nothing in all this noise that thou hast heard of this sottish man, but a design to beguile thee of thy salvation, by turning thee from the way in which I had set thee. After this, Evangelist called aloud to the heavens for confirmation of what he said. And with that there came words and fire out of the mountain, under which poor Christian stood, that made the hair of his flesh stand. The words were thus pronounced: As many as are of the works of the law are under the curse, for it is written, Cursed is everyone that continueth not in all the ways that are written in the book of life of the law to do them. Excuse me. Now Christian looked for nothing but death, and began to cry out lamentably, even cursing the time in which he met with Mr. Worldly Wiseman, still calling himself 1,000 fools for hearkening to his counsel. He also was greatly ashamed to think that this gentleman's arguments, flowing only from the flesh, should have that prevalency with him to forsake the right way. This done, he applied himself again to Evangelist, in words and sense as follows: Sir, what think you? Is there hopes? May I now go back and go up to the wicket gate? Shall I not be abandoned for this, and sent back from thence ashamed? I am sorry I have hearkened to this man's counsel, but may my sin be forgiven? Then said Evangelist to him, Thy sin is very great, for by it thou hast committed 2 evils. Thou hast forsaken the way that is good, to tread in the forbidden paths. Yet will the man of the gate receive thee, for he has good will for men only, said he. Take heed that thou not turn aside again, lest thou perish from the way, when his wrath is kindled but a little. Then did Christian address himself to go back, and Evangelist, after he had kissed him, gave him one smile and bid him Godspeed. So he went on with haste. Neither spake he to any man by the way, nor if any man asked him would he vouchsafe them an answer. He went like one that was all the while treading on forbidden ground, and could by no means think himself safe, till again he was got into the way which he left to follow Mr. Worldly Wiseman's counsel. So in process of time Christian got up to the gate. Now over the gate there was written, Knock, and it shall be opened to you. He knocked, and therefore, there's a note, he that will enter in must first without stand knocking at the gate, nor heed and doubt that is a knocker but to enter in, for God can love him and forgive his sin. More than once or twice saying, May I now enter here? Will he within open to sorry me? Though I have been an undeserving rebel, then I shall not fail to sing his lasting praises on high. At last there came a grave person to the gate, named Goodwill, who asked, Who was there? And whence he came? And what would he would have? Christian, here is a poor burdened sinner. I come from the city of destruction, but I am going to Mount Zion, that I may be delivered from the wrath to come. I would therefore, sir, since I am informed that by this gate is the way hither, know if you are willing to let me in. Goodwill, I am willing with all my heart. And with that he opened the gate. So when Christian was stepping in, the other gave him a pull. Then said Christian, What means this? The other told him, A little distance from this gate there is erected a strong castle, of which Beelzebub is the captain. From thence both he and them that are there with him shoot arrows at those that come up to this gate, if haply they may die before they can enter in. Then said Christian, I rejoice and tremble. So when he was got in, the man at the gate asked him, Who directed him hither? Evangelist bid me to come hither and knock, as I did. And he said, That you, sir, would tell me what I must do. An open door is set before thee, and no man can shut it. Now I begin to reap the benefits of my hazards. But how is it that you came alone? Because none of my neighbors saw their danger as I saw mine. Did any of them know of your coming? Yes, my wife and children saw me at first and called after me to turn again, and also some of my neighbors stood crying and calling after me to return, but I put my fingers in my ears and so came on my way. But did none of them follow you to persuade you to go back? Yes, both obstinate and pliable. Ooh, there's a little bookmark inside of it. Hello, nurse. Oh, it rotted away. Never mind. It's a very old book. But when they saw that they could not prevail, obstinate went railing back, but pliable came with me a little way. But why did he not come through? So we indeed came both together until we came at the slough of despond, into which we also suddenly fell. And then my neighbor Pliable was discouraged, and would not adventure further. Wherefore, getting out again on that side next to his own house, he told me that I should possess the brave country alone for him. So he went his way, and I came mine. He after obstinate, and I to this gate. Then said Goodwill, Alas, poor man, is the celestial glory of so small esteem with him, that he counteth not worth running the hazards of a few difficulties to obtain it? Truly, said Christian, I have said the truth of Pliable, and if I should also say the truth of myself, it will appear there is no betterment twixt him and myself. 'Tis true he went back to his own house, but I turned aside to go in the way of death, being persuaded thereto by the carnal arguments of one Mr. Worldly Wiseman. Oh, did he light upon you? What, he would have had you sought for ease at the hands of Mr. Legality. They are both of them a very cheat. But did you take his counsel? Yes, as far as I durst. I went out to find Mr. Legality until I thought that the mountain that stands by his house would have fallen on my head, wherefore there I was forced to stop. That mountain has been the death of many, and will be the death of many more. 'Tis well you escaped being by it dashed to pieces. Why, truly, I do not know what has become of me there. Had not Evangelist happily met me again as I was musing in the midst of my dumps. But 'twas God's mercy that he came to me again, for else I had never come hither. But now that I am come, such a one as I am, more fit indeed for death by that mountain, than thus to stand talking with my Lord. But, oh, what a favor is this to me, that yet I am admitted entrance here. We will make no objection against any, notwithstanding all that they have done before they come hither. They in no wise are cast out, and therefore, good Christian, come a little way with me, and I will teach thee about the way you must go. Look before thee. Dost thou see this narrow way? That is the way you must go. It was cast up by the patriarchs, prophet, and Christ and his apostles, and it is as straight as a rule can make it. This is the way thou must go. But, said Christian, is there no turning nor windings by which a stranger may lose his way? Yes, there are many ways, but down upon this, and they are crooked and wide. But this thou mayest distinguish from the right from the wrong. the right from the wrong, that only being straight and narrow. Then I saw in my dream that Christian asked him further if he could not help him off with his burden that was on his back, for as yet he had not gotten rid of it thereof, nor could he by any means get it off without help. And he told them, As to thy burden, be content to bear it until thou comest to the place of deliverance, for then it will fall off thy back itself. Then Christian began to gird up his loins and to address him to his journey. So the other told him that by that he was gone some distance from the gate, he would come at the house of the interpreter, at whose door he should knock, and he would show him excellent things. Then Christian took his leave of his friend, and he again bid him Godspeed. Then he went on till he came at the house of interpreter, where he knocked over and sent and over. At last one came to the door and asked who was there. Sir, here is a traveler who was bid by an acquaintance of the good man of this house to call here for my profit. I should therefore speak with the master of the house. So he called for the master of the house, who after a little time came to Christian and asked him what he would have. Sir, I am a man that am come from the city of destruction, and am going to Mount Zion. And I was told by the man that stands at the gate at the head of this way, that if I called here, you would show me excellent things, such as would be a help to me in my journey. Then said interpreter, Come, I will show thee that which will be profitable to thee. So he commanded this man to light the candle, and bid Christian follow him. So he had him unto a private room, and bid his man open the door, which when he had done, Christian saw the picture of a very grave person hung up against the wall. And this was the fashion of it. It had eyes lift up to heaven, the best books in his hand, the laws of truth were written upon his lips, the world was behind his back, it stood as if it pleaded with men, and a crown of gold did hang over his head. Then said Christian, What means this? Interpreter responded, The man whose picture this is one of 1,000. He can beget children, travel in birth with children, and nurse them himself when they are born. And whereas thou seest him with his eyes lift up to heaven, the best of books in his hand, and the law of truth writ upon his lips, it is to show thee that his work is to know and unfold dark things to sinners. Even as thou seest him stand as if he pleaded with men, and whereas thou seest the world is cast behind him, and that a crown hangs over his head, that is to show thee that slighting and despising the things that are present, for the love that he hath to his master's service, he is sure in the world that comes next to have glory for his reward. Now said interpreter, I have shown thee this picture first, because the man whose picture this is the only man whom the Lord of the place whither thou art going hath authorized to be thy guide in all difficult places thou mayest meet with in the way. Wherefore take good heed to what I have showed thee, and bear well in my mind what thou hast seen, lest in thy journey thou meet with some that pretend to lead thee right, but their way goes down to death. Then he took him by the hand and led him into a very large parlor that was full of dust, because never swept, the which, after he reviewed a little while, the interpreter called for a man to sweep. Now when he began to sweep, the dust so abundantly to fly about, that Christian had almost therewith been choked. Then said interpreter to a damsel that stood by, Bring hither the water, and sprinkle the room, which when she had done, it was swept and cleansed with pleasure. Then said Christian, What means this? The interpreter answered, This parlor is the heart of a man that was never sanctified by the sweet grace of the gospel. This dust is his original sin and inward corruptions. There's an image of people sweeping in a dust cloud. That have defiled the whole man. He that began to sweep at first is the law, but she that brought water and did sprinkle it, the gospel. Now, whereas thou sawest that so soon as the first began to sweep, the dust did fly about, that the room by him could not be cleansed, but that thou wast almost choked therein, this is to show thee that the law, instead of cleansing the heart by its working from sin, doth revive and put strength into and increase it in the soul, even as it doth discover and forbid it, but doth not give power to subdue. Again, as thou sawest the damsel sprinkle the room with water, upon which it was cleansed with pleasure, this is to show thee that the gospel comes in from the sweet and precious influences thereof to the heart. Then I may say, even as thou sawest the damsel lay the dust by sprinkling the floor with water, so is sin vanquished and subdued, and the soul made clean through the faith of it, and consequently fit for the King of glory to inhabit. Excuse me. I saw, moreover, in my dream that interpreter took him by the hand and had him into a little room, where sat 2 little children, each one in his chair. The name of the eldest was Passion, and of the other Patience. Passion seemed to be much discontent, but Patience was very quiet. Then Christian asked, what is the reason of the discontent of Passion? The interpreter answered, the governor of them that would have him stay for his best things till the beginning of the next year, but he would have it all now. But Patience is willing to wait. Then I saw one came to Passion and brought him a bag of treasure, and poured it down at his feet, the which he took up and rejoiced therein, and withal laughed Patience to scorn. But I beheld for a while, and he had lavished all away. There was nothing left to him but rags. Then said Christian to the interpreter, expound this matter more fully to me. So he said, these 2 lads are figures, Passions of the men of this world, and Patience of the men of that which is to come. For as here thou seest, Passion will have all now this year, that is to say, in this world. So are the men of the world. They must have all their good things now. They cannot stay till next year, that is, until the next world, for their portion of good. That proverb, a bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush, is of more authority to them than all the divine testimonies of the good of the world to come. But as thou sawest that he had quickly lavished all away, and had presently left him nothing but rags, so it will be with all such men at the end of the world. Then said Christian, now I see Patience has the best wisdom, and that upon many accounts. 1, because he stays for the best things. 2, and also because he will have the glory of his, when the other hath nothing but rags. Nay, said interpreter, you should add another. To wit, the glory of the next world will never wear out, but these are suddenly gone. Therefore Passion had not so much reason to laugh at Patience, because he had his good things first, as Patience will have to laugh at Passion, because he had his best things last. For first must give place to last, because last must have his time to come, but last gives place to nothing, for there is not another to succeed. He therefore that hath his portion first must needs have a time to spend it, but he that hath his portion last may have it lastingly. Therefore it is said of Dives, in thy life thou receivest thy good things, and likewise Lazarus evil things, but now he is comforted, and thou art tormented. Christian, then I perceive 'tis not best to covet things that are now, but to wait for things to come. Interpreter: You say truth, for the things that are seen are temporal, but the things that are not seen are eternal. But through this be so. Yet since things are present, and our fleshly appetite are such near neighbors one to another, and again, because things to come and carnal sense are such strangers to one to another, therefore it is that the first of these so suddenly fall into amity, and that distance is so continued between the second. I'm going to take a second here. I need some water. Rest my voice for a minute. I'm a big fan. I like this stuff. Partially because it's a way to explain Christian ideas explicitly, but also not being distracted by different examples that exist in the world. So you see the man who has it all, but he doesn't have a spirit to him. Well, that's by design. You know, my uncle, I've mentioned before, is very wealthy, but he has no Christian spirit to him. He does not have any Christian tumos, I guess. He has no patience. He has passion for the world. You may also look at the things where one tries to clean oneself up, but you can't do it without the gospel. Or, I'm not really sure about the man in the portrait. That one's escaping me right now. But you see where it's going. Pardon me. I should have prepared this earlier, but I did not. I'm sure Mr. Worldly Wiseman could have told me, oh, there it is, that I would make this mistake. Pardon me. I'll be right back. Whew. For those of you turning in, I am reading Pilgrim's Progress. I don't think I'll get it all done. We'll see how far I get. I'm not sure. Man, I should probably okay. Alright, I'll read as far as his salvation. Apologies for the dead air. I'm resting my voice for a minute. Gotta see how the cookie clicker is going. You know what I mean? Them juicy beetroots don't come easy. This is such a beautiful book. And there's another part of it where his wife takes a journey as well. It's interesting. It's very interesting. Partially because it's hard to separate out uh, what's fiction. Like, it's more than just a guide. Like, there's a reason this one took hold, and not others that are written that are nothing more but scraps. And Baptists were a severe minority in their time, in this time. Then I saw in my dream that the interpreter took Christian by the hand and led him into a place where was a fire burning against the wall, and one standing by it always, casting much water upon it to quench it. Yet did the fire burn higher and hotter. Then said Christian, "What means this?" The interpreter answered, "This fire is the work of grace that is wrought in the heart. He that casts water upon it to extinguish and put it out is the devil. But in that thou seest fire notwithstanding burn higher and hotter, thou shalt see the reason of that." So he had him about to the back of the wall, where he saw a man with a vessel of oil in his hand, of which he did continually cast, but secretly, into the fire. Then said Christian, "What means this?" The interpreter answered, "This is Christ, who continually with the oil of his grace maintains the work already begun in the heart, by the means of which, notwithstanding what the devil can do, the souls of his people prove gracious still. And in that thou sawest that the man stood behind the wall to maintain the fire, this is to teach thee that it is hard for the tempted to see how this work of grace is maintained in the soul. I saw also that the interpreter took him again by the hand, and led him into a pleasant place, where was builded a stately palace, beautiful to behold, at the sight of which Christian was greatly delighted. He saw also upon the top thereof certain persons walked, who were clothed all in gold. Then said Christian, "May I go in hither?" Then the interpreter took him and led him up toward the door of the palace. And behold, at the door stood a great company of men, as desirous to go in, but durst not. There also sat a man at a little distance from the door, at the table side, with a book and his inkhorn before him, to take the name of him that should enter therein. He saw also that in the doorway stood many men in armor to keep it, being resolved to do to the man that would enter what hurt and mischief they could. Now was Christian somewhat in amaze. At last, when every man started back for fear of the armed men, Christian saw a man of very stout countenance come up to the man that sat there to write, saying, "Sir, set down my name, sir." The which he had done, he saw the man draw his sword, and put a helmet on his head, and rush towards the door upon the armed men, who laid upon him with deadly force. But the man, not at all discouraged, fell to cutting and to hacking most fiercely. So after he had received and given many wounds to those that attempted to keep him out, he cut his way through them all, and pressed forward into the palace, at which there was a pleasant voice heard from those that were within, even of those that walked upon the top of the palace, saying, come in, eternal glory thou shalt win." So he went in, and was clothed with such garments as they. Then Christian smiled and said, "I think verily I know the meaning of this." Now said Christian, "Let me go hence." "Nay, stay," said the interpreter, "till I have showed thee a little more, and after that thou shalt go on thy way." So he took him by the hand again, and led him into a very dark room, where there sat a man in an iron cage. Now the man, to look on, seemed very sad. He sat with his eyes looking down to the ground, his hands folded together, and he sighed, as if he would break his heart. Then said Christian, "What means this?" At which the interpreter bid him talk with the man. Then said Christian to the man, What art thou? I am what I was not once. What was thou once? The man said, I was once a fair and flourishing professor, both in my own eyes and also in the eyes of others. I once was, as I thought, fair for the celestial city, and had then even joy at the thought that I should go hither. Well, but what art thou now? I am now a man of despair, and am shut up in it, as in this iron cage. I cannot get out. Oh, now I cannot. But how camest thee into these conditions? I left off to watch and be sober. I laid in the reins upon the neck of my lusts. I sinned against the light of the word, and the goodness of God. I have grieved the Spirit, and he is gone. I tempted the devil, and he is come to me. I have provoked God to anger, and he has left me. I have so hardened my heart that I cannot repent. Then said Christian to the interpreter, But is there no hopes for such a man as this? Ask him, said the interpreter. Is there no hope, but you must be kept in the iron cage of despair? No, none at all. Why? The Son of the Blessed is very pitiful. I have crucified him to myself afresh. I have despised his person. I have despised his righteousness. I have counted his blood as an unholy thing. I have done despite to the Spirit of grace. Therefore I have shut myself out of all the promises, and there are now remains to me nothing but threatenings, dreadful threatenings, faithful threatenings, of certain judgment, which shall devour me as an adversary. For what did you bring yourself into this condition? For the lusts, pleasure, and profits of the world, in the enjoyment of which I did then promise myself much delight. But now every one of those things also bite me, and gnaw me like a burning worm. But canst thou not now repent and turn? God hath denied me his repentance. His word gives me no encouragement to believe. Yea, himself hath shut me up in his iron cage, nor can all the men in the world let me out again. O eternity, eternity, how shall I grapple with the misery that I must meet with in eternity? Then said the interpreter to Christian, Let this man's misery be remembered by thee, and be an everlasting caution to thee. Well said, Christian. This is fearful. God help me to be watch, and be sober, and to pray that I may shun the causes of this man's misery. Sir, is it not time for me to go on my way now? Tarry till I show thee one thing more, and then thou shalt go on thy way. So he took Christian by the hand again, and led him into a chamber where there was one rising out of bed. And as he put on his raiment, he shook and trembled. Then said Christian, Why does this man tremble? The interpreter then bid him to tell to Christian the reason of his doing. So he began and said, This night as I was in my sleep I dreamed, and behold, the heavens grew exceedingly black, and it thundered and lightninged most fearful wise, and that it put me into an agony. So I looked up in my dream, and I saw the clouds rack at an unusual rate, upon which I heard a great sound of a trumpet, and also a man sitting upon a cloud, attended with the thousands of heaven. They were all in flaming fire. Also the heavens were on a burning flame. I heard then a voice saying, Arise, ye dead, and come to judgment. And with that the rocks rent, the graves opened, and the dead that were therein came forth. Some of them were exceeding glad, and looked upward, and some sought to hide themselves under the mountain. Then I saw the man that sat upon the cloud open the book, and bid the world draw near. Yet there was, by reason of a fierce flame that issued out and came from before him, a convenient distance twixt him and them, as betwixt a judge and the prisoners of the bar. I heard it also proclaimed to them that attended to the man that sat on the cloud, gather together the tares, the chaff, the stubble, and cast them into the burning lake. And with that the bottomless pit opened, just whereabout I stood, out of the mouth of which there came in an abundant manner smoke and coals of fire with hideous noises. It was also said to the same persons, gather my wheat into the garner. And with that I saw many catched up and carried away into the clouds, but I was left behind. I also sought to hide myself, but I could not, for the man that sat upon the cloud still kept his eyes on me. My sins also came into my mind, and my conscience did accuse me on every side. Upon this I awakened from my sleep. But what was it that made you so afraid of the sight? Why, I thought the day of judgment had come, and that I was not ready for it. But this frighted me most, that the angels gathered up several and left me behind. Also the pit of hell opened her mouth just where I stood. My conscience soon afflicted me, and as I thought, the judge had always his eye on me, showing indignation in his countenance. Then said interpreter for Christian to Christian, hast thou considered all these things? Yes, and they put me in hope and fear. Well, keep all these things so in thy mind, that they may be as a goad to thy sides, to prick thee forward in the way thou must go. Then Christian began to gird up his loins, and to address himself to his journey. Then said the interpreter, the Comforter be always with thee, good Christian, to guide thee in the way that leads to the city. So Christian went on his way, saying, Here have I seen things rare and profitable, things pleasant, dreadful, things to make me stable. And what I have begun to take in hand, then let me think on them and understand. Wherefore they showed me was, and let me be thankful, O good interpreter, to thee. Now I saw in my dream that the highway up which Christian was to go was fenced on either side with a wall, and that wall is called salvation. Up this way therefore did burdened Christian run, but not without great difficulty because of the load on his back. He ran thus till he came at a place somewhat ascending, and upon that place stood a cross, and a little below in the bottom a sepulchre. So I saw in my dream, and this is of course an image inside the book, that just as Christian came up with the cross, his burden loosed from off his shoulders and fell from his back and began to tumble, and so continued to do till it came to the mouth of the sepulchre, where it fell in, and I saw it no more. Who's this, the pilgrim? How 'tis very true. Old things are passed away, all become new. Strange, he's another man, upon my word. They be fine feathers that make a fine bird. Then was Christian glad and lightsome, and said with a merry heart, He hath given me rest by his sorrow, and life by his death. Then he stood a while to look and wonder, for it was very surprising to him that the sight of the cross should ease him of his burden. He looked therefore and looked again, even until the springs that were in his head sent waters down his cheeks. Now as he stood looking and weeping, behold, 3 shining ones came to him and saluted him with, Peace be to thee. So the first said to him, Thy sins be forgiven. The second stripped him of his rags, and clothed him with change of raiment. The third set a mark on his forehead, and gave him a roll with a seal on it, which he bade him look on as he ran, and that he should give it in at the celestial gate. And so they went their way. And there's an image of that too. Then Christian gave 3 leaps for joy and went on singing. Thus far did I come loaden with my sin, nor could aught ease the grief that I was in. Till I came hither, what a place is this? Must there be the beginning of my bliss? Must hear the burden fall off of my back. Must hear the strings that bound it to me crack. Blessed cross, blessed sepulchre, blessed rather be the man that there was put to shame for me. I saw then in my dream that he went on thus, even until he came at the bottom, where he saw a little out of the way 3 men fast asleep with fetters on their heels. The name of one was Simple, another Sloth, and the third Presumption. I think I'll stop there. That's about an hour or so of reading. And it got to one of the first peaks of the book. It's strange. It's hard to explain what the climax of the book is. For many Western sort of ideas to it, right? The life and the peak of it is in salvation. But it's very clear here that the what's being drummed up is not the actual salvation experience, but rather sort of the death and life of the Christian. The mountain that Christian crawls up, quote unquote mountain, is also a peak of the story. So that, when he perishes, and comes to salvation, then he, has fulfilled his arc. But not until then. Instead, he must experience the life that he has. Salvation is not the climax of some sort of story arc, but rather salvation is a way stop towards his entrance into heaven. Rather than a Christian being some sort of protagonist that must defeat himself or the villain or whatever, he must complete the journey. He does nothing but bring himself through faith to the cross. He is looking forward to the cross. He may be led aside by Mr. Worldly Wiseman or by or disheartened by Pliable, but he does not actually abandon his quest of loosing the burden of sin from him. We are all born with a burden of sin. We have it through our actions. All our lust, all our greed, and other horrible things and sins that we commit. When we come to the cross, in this case, he doesn't even pray to the cross or anything like that. It is simply when he comes into its presence, the burden of sin looses itself and falls off his back and rolls into the grave where Christ resurrected from. He is a new man. Joy comes to him. It's a climax of his old life where it dies, it perishes. The sin, it rolls into a tomb. You'll never see it again. But then when he comes up, there's still the life before him to live. He's not dead. He's not retired. There's no villain that was slain or anything like that. Many stories often have salvation as the climax, or the lead up to the climax, where, like in Left Behind, the reporter becomes saved in a United Nations bathroom, and by praying to God, and then he walks into the presence of the Antichrist and discovers that the lies no longer work on him. This is, of course, the only time a journalist has become saved in fiction, or in real life, I'm sure. I shouldn't say that, but, journalists, you don't hate them enough. But you see that there's a sort of change there. The climax was him meeting the Antichrist in this case. The old Left Behind series, not the new one with Nicolas Cage, which has no explanation for existence. And then, there's the rest of the story for him. But it's different for Pilgrim's Progress. John Bunyan understood that the life still has to be lived outside of the salvation experience. You are still on the journey outside of salvation. You still have a life you have to live. You still meet people on the road like he would have with, what was it, Simple, Sloth, and I can't remember the third guy, but it began with a P. I hope you guys enjoyed this brief thing here. I'm going to plan on reading it out on different times, just so that I can read it with you and make comments like these. Other ones will be short, and I'll be also adding them to Twitter in live spaces. I want to thank you all for joining, and I hope you have a wonderful evening. Next week, Anthony and I are going to make fun of somebody who's making some bad decisions on the internet. Bye! Maybe.